Well, I wanted to say thank you so much for, I believe that it is 4 o'clock straight up, so we'll begin. And I will try to be a scientist. I'm also not a paleontologist. Try to use my time wisely. I will tell you how much I appreciate you staying for the whole. And so I know that there might be some discrepancies about actually what these creatures are on the board versus reptiles versus birds versus dinosaurs. But I hope that in our discussion that we can look at the problems associated with this conversation, and not just so much I just wanted to point that out. So I appreciate that conversation might drive us a little crazy, but I'd like you to look for the principles in this particular discussion. As many of you know or you've read in the materials, my name is Koen, and I am a number of things. I practice out of the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I appreciate the rain. I don't know if you've been watching the news or the Weather Channel, but I believe Duluth is looking to get another 12 inches of snow today. And I have to tell you, it's been snowing since October. So, and our summers are usually short, but I imagine that this one's going to be even shorter. So, so I appreciate the rain. So. There's that. So I'm a mediator in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I also do diversity training. I sit on a number of boards of community organizations, and I love helping people deal, with conflict, but also helping people to recognize the humanity in other people. And we'll talk about that as one of the core pieces to understanding why there's such a visceral response when we start talking about conflict, or when we encounter conflict. There's a really visceral, primal response that we get, and how do we overcome that to actually get to some resolutions. So to begin, what I'd like to do is, in the handout that I just sent around, and there are a couple of people who just walked in, so I'm sure you get that. You're welcome. There is you'll notice that on the right-hand side, there's a square with 4 circles on the outside of that square. Does everyone see that? All right, do you need a handout? Okay, so okay. So, and I will also put some on the end, so as friends come in, you can point them to some handouts. All right, good. So we'll set her there. Thank you. So what I'd like you to do is, in the circles, just outside of the square, I want you to put 4 things that you value. 4 things that you value, or that are important to you. For example, it might be an individual, right? A significant other, a grandchild, a niece or a nephew, someone that is important to you. It could be a thing, like a motorcycle or sailboat. It could be a concept, like freedom, justice, or love. It could be a place, like the Seattle Sound or Bemidji, Minnesota. Really cold place in Minnesota. So one thing that you value in each one of those circles, on the outside of it, yep, okay. Yes, sir. So in each one of those circles, one thing that you value or that is important to you, outside of the square in those circles. right, it looks like most people have stopped writing, so we've done that part. So part B, what I'd like you to do, in each corner of the square, I want you to put one physical representation of yourself. So let's say my limo driver is coming to pick you up for a party. My limo driver has never met you. So what descriptors would you use to describe yourself so that my limo driver would know that it was you that he was looking for? All right? So 4 physical descriptions that my limo driver could use to come pick you up, one in each corner of that square.
Does it have anything to do with what we value or no?
However you want to answer the question is appropriate. But my limo driver is going to know that it is you by these 4 descriptors. You can spell however you want to spell. All right. So most folks look like they've stopped writing, so we'll go to part C. So part 1, part A, I asked you to write down what? 4 things that you value or that are important to you. The second thing that I asked you to do is to write down 4 what? Physical descriptors. Now what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to join in me with this game. And the game is very simple. What I'd like for you to do is to try to get as many people as you possibly can to put their signature next to one of those things that they either share or agree with. That you have written, those 8 things you have written on your paper. So I want you to find as many people as you can who either share what you have on your paper or they agree with it. Hold on. We give everybody the same amount of time. You have exactly 90 seconds to do this starting now. 30 seconds, 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
4, 3, 2, 1, and game over. Game over. over.
We're done? We're done?
We're done. All right, so as we move into this next part, where is there anyone who was not able to find anyone to sign on their paper at all that has any space left in their paper? Okay, cool. So everybody was able to at least find someone that they either agreed with or they actually shared something that they had on their paper. Is that correct? All right, great. So as you were going around the room, were there some, yes?
I came up with 4 things that I didn't find anywhere.
Okay. So we'll address that in just a second. All right? So as you were going around the room, were there things that you saw in other people's paper and you were like, oh, why didn't I think of that? That's a great idea. What were some of those things that you saw in someone else's paper and you said, that's a good idea. Why didn't I think of that? Yes.
Female.
Being female. Why didn't I think of that? Yes, sir.
Bearded.
Being bearded. You didn't think about that. Yes. Being white. You didn't think about that.
Humility.
Having humility. I saw some hands over here. Yes, sir.
Integrity.
Having integrity. Singing. Nature. Somebody left me hanging because you had your hand up over here and I saw it. I saw another hand over here. Okay. All right. Cool. So those were obviously. Oh, yes, ma'am. Friends. Okay. So you saw friends. So I want to address your concern, right? So were there things that were either difficult or you actually weren't able to find someone to sign on? And what was one of yours?
Well, people signed on it, but out of kindness.
Pity signing.
Pity.
For the other reason.
Okay. So what was one of your things?
So, patience and understanding.
Okay, so we'll do patience first, all right? So please raise your hand if you value patience, even if it wasn't written on your paper. Okay? Cool. Let me have one more. Understanding. If understanding is important to you, even though you didn't write it on your paper, raise your hand. Okay? Cool. Was there someone else that had something that was difficult? Yes, ma'am.
Curly blonde hair.
Curly blonde hair. She raised her hand, right? That was excellent. That was perfect timing. Okay, so I'll pause now and ask. So wait a minute. So how many people value, or maybe you have, or have had curly blonde hair at some point? Please raise your hand. Okay, cool. All right. Yes, ma'am. Being Asian. All right. Cool. So please raise your hand if you value Asians, or you happen to be Asian. Raise your hand. All right. Cool. So I want to talk about this activity. Because I was a high school teacher for a number of years, and this is an activity that I typically would use at the beginning of a semester or beginning of a class. In all the trainings that I do, I typically open with something very similar to this. And why do you think that might be? Why might I start a training session using this particular activity? All right, connections? Yes, ma'am.
Common ground.
To find common ground. Right? All too often, particularly when we talk about, in my circles of influence, I do a lot of training on cultural competence, on diversity, anti-racism training, conflict resolution, and we oftentimes start the conversations in a place of dichotomy, a place of binary points of view, as opposed to using the multiplicity of our resources to find what is it that we have in common. And so, as we talk about this concept of the primal brain or our gut reactions to situations, what typically happens is that survival instinct is so focused on us that we're not able to see how our actions and how we relate to other people can actually help us accomplish our own goals. And so we'll continue to kind of talk about that. So I want you to count how many interactions you had with people. Where was the most totals of interactions you were able to make, or where people were able to sign? Was it on the circles, or was it in the square that you were able to find the most signatures or connections? And just count those and give me a number once you've been able to count those. Yes.
Do you have more?
Oh, yes, yes. You're very welcome.
Yeah.
All right. So where did you find the most? Yes, ma'am.
Family and health.
Family and health. And is that in something that's in values? All right. So you found the most in values. So please raise your hand if you counted, and most of your things were in values. All right. So I would assume that the rest of you had most of yours in physical features. Is that right? Or they were equally split. Okay. So raise your hand if they were equally split. Equally split. All right. Now raise your hand if you were able to find more connections with your physical descriptors. Okay. Cool. Now I have some people who didn't raise their hand at all. So where is that group? The group that didn't raise their hand at all. Where?
We did it wrong.
You never do it wrong, right? You just did it differently. So how did you do it?
Oh, they just signed randomly.
Oh, so they just signed randomly. They were being kind. Right? There was another hand up here I saw. Yes.
Well, I noticed that I completely ignored the physical descriptions. The one thing I was actually very interested in was the values.
Okay.
When I was doing other people's, and I find that interesting.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of the exercise, it's really helpful to me. I'm pointing that out.
Good. No. Because, yes, ma'am.
Well, I was going to say, I did kind of the opposite. I put female on here, and I was trying to get as many as I could. So I went up to the females. Like, do you have females?
So you went to females specifically to.
I think I kind of did that. I was like, oh, we probably have this together. Like,
Okay. So you made some assumptions about what you have together, what you have in common,
yeah.
based on phenotypes, right? Yeah. Any other things that came up for folks? So I like this particular piece for a number of reasons. One of which is what you just talked about in terms of oftentimes people look at values more than they do physical descriptors of each other. What I will say is that I am shooting fish in a barrel here, right? So there is an inclination that most of us have, being that we seek to help people mediate conflict. So there's a certain kind of way that we think that other folks don't think. So I want you to think about how other people might not think how we think. And so oftentimes when I do this particular exercise, what I find is very interesting is that there is a large majority of people who seek out physical encounter or seek out the physical representations or the things that people wrote down about them over their values. And why do you think that might be? Why might people seek out those physicals? Yes?
Well, it's faster. Aren't we supposed to get as many as possible?
You're supposed to get as many as possible, and it's faster to do that, right? It takes longer to find out about what? Values. And oftentimes we're in such a rush in our society. We have such a microwave, Facebook society. It's funny, I'm talking to my niece in Ohio, sitting in the sitting out in the Commons area, right? Everything was instantaneous. And I was mad when I'm talking to her when it took more than 3 seconds for her to respond back to me, right? Although we're half the country away from each other, I was expecting that instantaneous communications. Letters kill her. She's like, when is it coming? Right? And so in our everyday interactions, it takes a while to get to actually know someone's values. It's easier to go off of what we think is what we think we know about people, and that is the reptilian brain at work. Right? So it's that quick stuff. It's the I need to analyze danger versus resources. I need to do that in a very quick way, particularly when I'm in a situation where not doing that, or I think I'm in a situation where not doing that could actually cause me harm, right? So I'm not sure where folks are from, you know, an urban area, a suburban area, or a rural area, but I do know that there's a certain kind of swagger and sway that I have to have in urban areas that I don't necessarily have to have when I'm in suburban areas or rural areas. Well, maybe when in rural areas I might have to have that same kind of swag because, you know, they're like, you're not from here, are you? Right? So context becomes extremely important in terms of how we interact with each other and how we relate to each other. Most of you have either seen or have access to the PowerPoint presentation that I submitted, and we'll address some of that stuff, but I don't want to bore you too much because you can read and look for yourself. But I do want to talk about some of the truths about human beings. And this becomes extremely important for those of us who are trying to help and aid people in the state of conflict. One is that human beings can learn, change, and grow. Who I am today is not who I was at 17, thank God. I don't know if you know 17-year-olds, but they can be a handful, right? So human beings can learn, change, and grow. Even when we don't see it, we have to hold that out for them. Because there were certain behaviors that I had as a teen that people kept telling me, change this behavior, change this behavior, change this behavior, and I didn't change it until I changed it. And because they had hope that I would, they kept reminding me that this was a good behavior to have, right? And so even when we don't see that people can learn, change, and grow, we have to hold it out for them that they can, because they can. Next, people do what they think works even when what? Even when it doesn't work. They do it because they think that it works. Now, what is the basis that they have used to believe that this particular set of behaviors works?
Maybe it worked once before.
Because it's worked in the past. And so because I've had success with that behavior in the past, if I see a similar situation in my present, it's reasonable to assume that same behavior will work in my present, which also means that if I encounter a behavior in the future, that behavior will also be effective, even when it's not. And so when will someone change their behavior? When it doesn't work? Well, we've established that people do what they think works even when it doesn't. And so I keep doing this behavior. An example, a kid falls out in a major department store. Has anyone seen that happen? Ah! Right? You don't see 35-year-old. Well, maybe you do see it. It's not common to see 35-year-olds doing that same behavior. And why is that? Is that falling out behavior of a 7-year-old actually effective? So it may have been effective, but on a regular basis with your child, your niece, your nephew, your grandchild, is that going to get them what they want ultimately? Probably not. So when does the 7-year-old turn into the 35-year-old that doesn't do that any longer? Yes, ma'am.
When the behavior is no longer meeting your needs, or your needs are no longer being met by the behavior.
When they realize that the behavior is not effective. When they have the realization. Right? Because we recognize that falling out is not going to get you what you want, but the behavior will never change until the individual realizes that that's not an effective behavior. All right? All human behavior is goal-directed. Even if people aren't clear about what their goal is, they are moving towards something through their behavior. Their behavior is leading them to something. And part of our job as helpers is to help them clarify what their goals are. It is very easy, particularly, I don't know if you work with teenagers or tweens, but it's very easy for us as adults to tell them or give them the answers. And how effective is that? Not very effective. Unless you're in the car, because then they can't get away from you. And I usually try to drive in areas where they can't get a signal, so then they really have to listen to me. Right? I don't want to listen to me. All right. And lastly, attitude is a reaction to a goal. What have we been taught about an attitude? Or what have you been taught about an attitude? What is an attitude? How many of you have an attitude right now? What's an attitude? It's a way of approaching something. It's a way of acting. It's the lens that you're looking through. Attitude, yes.
It usually has an emotional component.
It usually has some kind of emotional component.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset.
A way of expression.
It's a way of expression.
What is the use of the word where God's got attitude?
All right, so people also talk about this attitude that somebody's got, right? There was something else I heard. The receptiveness. All right, cool. And I will say that all of those are great definitions, and they were inadequate for my parents. My parents were a little old school, and so their parents spanked, and they also screamed and hollered. But my parents went to college, where my grandparents didn't. And so they got all these new tools from psychology classes and sociology classes that they would try to use on us as kids. And when those failed, they went back to what they knew, which was screaming and hollering. And so we would get my parents so flustered that they would say things like, my dad would say this, "Boy, you better fix your face." And so I go,